Okay, so welcome to the inaugural session of the Stoic Jew Shiur. Okay, for those who don't know, I started something called the Stoic Jew podcast 4 years ago as like a personal project. It actually started, it started, this is still during COVID. It started because I wanted to make use of any time spent in the bathroom, even brushing teeth, and I did not want to use my phone. And so I had been reading the Stoics since high school, and I decided to just, you know, put the Stoic books in the bathroom. And then I thought to myself, oh, why not like share this? So I started it off as like WhatsApp recordings, like were 5 minutes, and then I made it into a podcast, not a podcast in terms of other people other than the Stoics, but just something that I did. And this year is an effort to engage with those same texts in a different way. Pretty much anything that I've ever learned, I always learn better when I teach it. And I've never taught Stoicism before. Like it comes up in a lot of other shiurim, but I've never actually sat down and said, okay, let's learn Stoic texts. So that's one purpose. The other purpose is I was in the mood to give a summer shiur, but not in the mood to prepare. And so I did prepare this, but like not like in depth, like one summer I gave a shiur on Plato, the dialogues of Plato, and like that took a lot of preparation. And so this is going to be something I'm more familiar with. And then the third thing is just spreading the good of Stoicism. So I thought about doing like an intro, and I realized no, the best way to do it is to get right into the text. But I do think it's important to know a little bit about who we're reading. Okay, so Stoicism was a philosophy that was around for hundreds of years, or was active for hundreds of years. The three main Stoic sages, I guess, there are many, but the three main ones whose writings have come down to us that we base most of our views on are Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius in that order. Marcus Aurelius is considered the last of the big Stoic thinkers. Um, I just had ChatGPT generate these bullet points for talking points. So he was born in 121 CE and he died in 180 CE. He was he was appointed as an emperor to succeed Antoninus Pius, and he reigned from 161 to 180 to his death in 180. And he's considered, where does it say this? One of the five good emperors. Okay, I guess that's a thing in Roman history that there were five emperors who were considered good, just like I guess Lahavdil, but we had a couple good kings in Yehuda, and the rest of them were bad. I don't know if it's exactly like that. But that is Marcus Aurelius, and you could read more about his life in other places, but that's all we need to know. The reason why I'm going over this is because the book that we're reading is I don't know who called it Meditations. It was his personal journal. Okay, so he wrote it for himself. He did not ever intend for it to be published or presumably even read. Apparently, there are a lot of things in it that someone of his stature wouldn't have written if he knew that it was going to be published or seen. Unlike, for example, the letters of Seneca. Seneca is probably the best writer among the Stoics, and the letters of Seneca are his main Stoic teachings, and that's letters from him to his pupil Lucilius. But he intended those letters to be public, even though he was writing for one student. But this is literally just Marcus Aurelius's journals that he wrote for himself. It was written in Greek, which was the language of philosophy, even though the language spoken in Rome was Latin. And he wrote them between the years 172 and 180. We're starting with book two because it was chronologically the first book, and book one is a different character. Book one is worth reading, but book one is basically his thank yous. He basically like writes about all the influential people in his life and what he gained from them. And like a pasuk in Mishlei says, I forgot which pasuk, you can tell a lot about a person by what they praise. Or maybe Lafi Sichlo Yehulal Ish. According to a man's intellect, he will be praised. I think someone interprets that to mean that you can see what a person values by what they praise. So you can learn a lot about Marcus Aurelius and his ideas from what he praises of people. But no book two is the first one that he wrote. Okay. And the approach we're going to take is as follows. Okay. This is obviously it's written in Greek. I don't know Greek, so I don't have access to the main translation. I chose my three favorite translations. Okay. There's George Long. It happens to be one in each century. George Long, published in 1862. I think this is the normal public domain translation. Arthur Spencer Lote Farquharson. What a name. Okay, 1944. And that's the one I used a lot, which is also available on the internet on Wikipedia or Wikimedia, whatever it is. And then this new one, which I really like, called it's not called, it's called The Meditations, but it's by Robin Waterfield, published in 2021, which is just more readable and has better footnotes. So what we're going to do is we're just like when we do Mishle in our Mishle Shiurim, we read several translations. We're going to read several translations here, and then I put them together in like a chart, not a chart, a table, so we can see them line by line. We're going to approach this the way we approach any Mishle, which is to ask questions on it and to analyze it and to try to get the ideas. But this is a paragraph, so we should keep in mind that this is like a unit, but we're probably going to analyze it sentence by sentence. Okay, so let's start off by just reading the translations. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to post them all in the chat one at a time, so you can have access to them. I don't think there's a way for me to post the table in the chat unless I make a separate document and upload it, which I did not think to do until just now. So here we go. Hold on. Okay, I don't know why. Oh, this one's too long. Hold on. Let's try this. Okay. Okay, so let's just read it. We're going to read through all three in one shot, and then we'll start asking the questions, okay? So here we go. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. But I, who have seen the nature of the good, that it is beautiful, and of the bad, that it is ugly, and the nature of him who does wrong, that it is akin to me, not only of the same blood or seed, but that it participates in the same intelligence and the same portion of the divinity, I can neither be injured by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly, nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him. For we are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To act against one another, then, is contrary to nature, and it is acting against one another to be vexed and to turn away. Okay, hold that thought. Here comes rendition number 2, Farquharson. Say to yourself in the early morning, I shall meet today inquisitive, ungrateful, violent, treacherous, envious, uncharitable men. All these things have come upon them through ignorance of real good and ill. But I, because I have seen that the nature of good is the right, and of ill the wrong, and that the nature of the man himself who does wrong is akin to my own, not of the same blood and seed, but partaking with me in mind, that is in a portion of divinity, I can neither be harmed by any of them, for no man can involve me in wrong, nor can I be angry with my kinsman or hate him. For we have come into the world to work together, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To work against one another, therefore, is to oppose nature, and to be vexed with one another or to turn away from him is to tend to antagonism. Okay, last translation, Waterfield. At the start of the day, tell yourself, I shall meet people who are officious, which I had to look up. Hold on, look it up again. Officious means assertive of authority in an annoyingly domineering way, especially with regard to petty or trivial matters. Okay, so think any like person who's in a bureaucratic position or administrative position, and think about the most annoying times when they've like opposed you and your goals. That's like that's officious. Okay, so I was just talking with someone yesterday about a certain college that some of us went to that has some annoying officious people to deal with. Okay, ungrateful, abusive, treacherous, malicious, and selfish. In every case, they've got like this because of their ignorance of good and bad. But I have seen goodness and badness for what they are, and I know what is good and what is morally right, and what is bad is what is morally wrong. And I've seen the true nature of the wrongdoer himself and know that he's related to me, not in the sense that we share blood and seed, but by virtue of the fact that we both partake in the same intelligence, and so of a portion of the divine. None of them can harm me anyway, because none of them can infect me with immorality, nor can I become angry with someone who's related to me or hate him, because we were born to work together, like feet or hands or eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To work against each other is therefore unnatural, and anger and rejection count as working against. Okay, so that is your that's your Marcus Aurelius here. Okay, so let's again. I know this is bigger chunk of text than we usually have for Mishle, but let's just dive into it. Okay, what are the questions and problems? And I think what we'll do is we're gonna raise all the questions and problems on the entire chapter, but then when we work through it, we'll start at the top because I think that's gonna be the easiest way to see the full picture. Okay, so what are the questions? And remember, use your hand raise feature because I cannot see everyone at a time because I only have one monitor. Yeah, Michael.
Like, why should you tell yourself this in the morning?
Okay, yeah. Why should you tell yourself this in the morning? Okay. And you can break that down into like why in the morning, why tell yourself, okay, why every morning. Okay. And in case you are wondering, have I done this? The answer is yes. I actually had this in yeshiva, in my room in yeshiva, in every room that I'm ever in my adult life, which is I've only lived in two places, in the YBT dorm and in my current apartment. I have a wall of quotes, and I positioned this one close to the door. And there were periods of my life where I would read this before setting out in the morning. And then if you attended Shalhevet in room 5, where I had my wall of quotes, then I had this also right next to the light switch on my wall of quotes so that people could see it in the morning. Okay. But yeah, that's a good question. Okay, Isaiah.
So in translations 1 and 2, I
Yeah.
noticed that says all these things happen to them or have come upon them.
Yeah.
But the things don't really seem to be events. They seem to more be traits that the people have. So why are they referring to them as things
Okay.
that
So
happen to
so
them?
this is a type of question that we would ask in Mishle, but I think unless you see something that I mean, let me put it this way. What I'm going to try to do, because we have such a big chunk of text, is I am going to try, I should have said this at the beginning. Let's try to focus on the major questions. And if you feel this is a major question, then definitely argue for it. But to me, like, I don't know how good that translation is. I don't really, care about the subtleties or style. And I think also because this is something that A, he wrote for himself, and B, he what do you call it? He did not edit, right? So then I think we should be less exacting than we are with Mishle on this. So again, if you think that this is a major question, go ahead and argue for it. But I'd say like, that's just what he's calling it. What do you say,
I hear
Isaiah?
what you're saying.
Okay. All right, Tamar.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is exactly a question, but like how many points are being made here?
Okay, good question. In fact, you know what we're gonna do? Let's yeah, should we no. Usually we color code these things, right? And like in Tehillim when we have a big chunk. I'm actually not going to do that because I don't want to take a stance on it, but I think that's a great point. Okay, how many distinct points are being made here? And I'm gonna go ahead and tack on to that question because this is just a good methodology question. How do they relate to one another? And I'm also going to say, I know you didn't ask this, what is the main idea? Okay, and I'm supposing that there is a main idea because this is one entry. Okay, and he could have written this as 2 entries, but he wrote it as 1. So yeah, Shmuel.
So it seems like he's talking about the idea of opposing traits, like good and evil. So how does that function in like a society where we know there is constant war and people don't get along who have these opposing traits, or if they
Okay.
have the same traits and don't get along?
Okay, so one other piece of background info, by the way, is even though Marcus Aurelius is considered to be one of the 5 good emperors, he had a ton of problems in his during his reign. There were, I think, constant attacks by the Parthians and other people who were invading. And in his court there were a lot of bad people. His own son. His son's name is Commodus, which in my mind, I call him like the toilet emperor, because like a commode, and also because he was a really, really like, bad person. I won't use a different adjective, that is more related to toilets. So like he did have to face a lot of these things. Okay, so I'm gonna attempt to translate this into like a snarky question. Tell me if this actually captures what you're saying. Yeah, but what if these people, but these people do have these bad qualities and they do pose problems in a society. So what are we supposed to do about that? Is that what you're getting at? You're getting at something different.
Rabbi, I think that's spot on.
Okay, good. Okay, Esty.
Sorry, this was just how did you suggest that one like seeing that there's 3 different translations and
Yeah.
some of them are overlap, the words overlap and some are very different.
Yeah.
I didn't catch. Did you say like does that just like a way to show you like that you're looking at something with different facets and not to get hung up on any words, or is there
Exactly.
something to do with that?
Yeah, that's how I do it. And this is not just for Stoicism. I mean, I was just talking about this with the more Nevuchim, which was written in Judeo-Arabic, and there are 5 translations that I consult. Are there 5? No, there's the old one, the Friedlander. There's the Pines, which has been the standard until now. There's the Goodman, which is the new one. There's Kafech, there's Makbili, and there's Ibn Tibon. Right, so 3 English translations and 3 Hebrew translations. And you look at them, and like I, as an English and Hebrew speaker, have no way of knowing the Judeo-Arabic, and I'm kind of at the mercy of the translators. So it's a combination of like, let's say I see 5 out of 6 of the translations that say things one way. So I will tend to give greater weight onto that. But then if the one other translation makes a better argument, I'll go with that. And then part of it is also just like what appeals to me more, like, we are, on the one hand, we are trying to learn what he's saying, but also like, there's a Rabbi Moskowitz anecdote that Moshe Mizels quotes to me, that and I've heard Rabbi Moskowitz say similar things, but Moshe Mizels says he was learning Mishlei with Rabbi Moskowitz, and someone asked Rabbi Moskowitz, like, how do you know that this is what Shlomo HaMelech intended? Classic question, right? So Rabbi Moskowitz said something like, we're trying to figure out what Shlomo said, but if it's not what he said and it's a good idea, then we're still learning, so we're trying as best as we can to figure out what it is, and I let that principle dictate which translations I latch onto, so
Okay, at the
it's
same
kind of a
time,
combination.
then you
Say
can't use the words to try and, pull meaning out of why certain words were chosen, because we don't know
Exactly.
exactly what the words were.
Exactly, yeah, and yeah, like what we would say is like you can't be medoctate, you can't like make very nuanced inferences from specific word usage.
Right, in the way that you can when you're learning.
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
Or something like
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And I was gonna make one more point about the translation as well. But I forgot what it was. Yeah. So Fega is posting in the chat saying, I can't use my microphone. Can someone please ask why we assume the flaws stem from ignorance? Okay, so that's a big question, right? So let's say here, what does he mean that these flaws stem from ignorance? And what is the basis of his claim? That's going to be a central thing. Yeah, Michael.
He says like halfway through that he recognizes the other person like shares a portion of the divine.
Yeah.
So what exactly does he learn from that? Is he learning from that he shouldn't be like upset about this person, or that they should work together? And how exactly does he learn that?
What exactly is he learning from the? Actually, let's actually make this a definition question first. Actually, no, it's not. No, never mind. What exactly is he learning from the fact that the other person shares in a portion of the divine, and how does this fit into his overall argument / technique? Okay, Ezra.
Yeah, what exactly is he saying that good and evil is?
Okay. Okay, right. So, this is a funny thing, okay? Since he wrote this for himself, so he does not have to spell things out, right? Like he says, I know the nature of the good and evil, right? So if you were writing a philosophy book, then we might kind of expect him to state what that is, right? But we don't have access to that. Now, I am deliberately choosing for sanity purposes / laziness purposes to not go through and prepare this like, oh, I'm going to read through every single Marcus Aurelius thing and try to come up with a theory about what his idea of the good and the evil is. I'm going to just work with what he's giving me in the order that he's giving it to me. So we might not be able to answer that question, okay? But we definitely need to ask what is the nature of good and evil, and then we'll say like this: what might Marcus have assumed, have meant by that? Okay, and I'm going to say might because of what I just said is we don't really know for sure. This is also a good opportunity, by the way, for me to just articulate a premise that I have about of the Stoic Jew podcast. Okay, this is my relationship to Stoicism, which is, Stoicism was, I'm going to just consult this for a second. 4 branches of Stoicism. I think it was ethics, logic, metaphysics, and physics. That's not what I was looking for. No, these are the 4 ideals. Okay, somewhere. Okay, you don't have to take my word for it. Real like Stoic philosophy has 4 areas of study. I think it was 4 areas of study: ethics, physics, okay, meaning science or the proto-science, metaphysics about like how God works and stuff about physics, and then logic. Okay, and most Stoic writers, like modern day writers, focus only on the ethics. And you're going to get a huge machlokes among people who study Stoicism about, is that a intellectually responsible move? Okay, my own policy, which I'm not going to go into now, but I just want to show you where I'm coming from, is to ignore Stoic physics and metaphysics and logic is really you can't ignore logic, but like logic isn't ideas, it's like rules of the mind of like consistency in thinking. I ignore metaphysics and physics to the extent that I can, because we have a different set of physics and metaphysics, right? We have modern physics, and then our metaphysics is the Torah's metaphysics. So it's always good to be aware that like he might be working with different metaphysical premises, excuse me, and it's not like we can just substitute his ideas for the Torah's ideas, but like I am a Jew. This is the Stoic Jew podcast, not the Jewish Stoic podcast. Okay. So I am trying to figure out what is useful for my practice and learning of Judaism from what he's saying. Okay. And there might be limits. And so a question like this, what was the Stoic idea of good and evil? He might have a different idea than Judaism, and we might need to understand his idea in order to understand what he's saying in the chapter. But what I ultimately want to get out of this is, to what extent can we apply this to our life as Jews? Okay, so good question, but I'm trying to justify why I am not going to delve into like his whole system of good and evil, from the get-go. And again, you could argue that what I'm doing is intellectually irresponsible. Okay. I blame it on Bruce Lee. Okay. Bruce Lee is, or blame it on Benzoma. Okay. So Bruce Lee says, take what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is uniquely your own, or essentially your own. That's his approach that's how he created his martial arts style of Jeet Kune Do. And Benzoma said, Ezehu Chacham Halom Mikol Adam, right? Who is wise? Someone who learns from everyone. And part of learning from everyone is learning what they say and hold by in their framework. But part of learning from everyone is, you see someone say something, and like it inspires a thought in you, and you take that and you make it your own. Okay, so that's kind of the approach I'm taking here. Okay, Isaiah.
Yeah, so related to question 3,
Yeah,
like a little later on, he says that these people, they can't harm him, or they can't like drag him into their badness.
right.
But it seems like that is something that could happen to me. Like
Right.
can he be influenced by these people? How is he saying that? On what grounds is he saying that it can't happen? Or
what does he mean when he says that these people cannot harm him? And then on what is his basis for saying that? Okay, seems like these people can harm him. Okay, Noah.
Okay, so this, I think, relates to what Isaiah just asked, but it also might be totally out of bounds.
Sure.
So, like, if we're not playing this way, I'll just sit down. But I am curious about how this differs and why this differs from our practice of each morning asking God to save us from various types of bad people.
Right. Yeah. As I was actually, I was, I was, I don't, like I said, I don't think I'm going to prepare this, every time, but I had this like moment of panic, of like, oh, what if I don't have anything to say? So I learned this with Ken for an hour and a half before Shiur tonight. And he pointed out that, and I actually had forgotten about this because I switched to a different nusach a long time ago, but I'm bringing this up because I want to see if this is what you were thinking of. In
So right before the Yokeda.
Right. So we say Yihiratze milfnach Hashem Elokai v'lekevosai shetatzilini hayom v'chol yom me'azei panim u'me'azus panim me'adam ra u'mechaver ra u'meshachin ra u'mepega ra u'misatan amashchis midin kashe u'mibaldin kashe Benshu ben Bris, ben Bris. So may be your will, Hashem, my God and God of my fathers, to save me today and every day from arrogant men and from arrogance, from an evil man, from evil companion, from evil neighbor, from evil mishap, and from the destructive Satan, and from a difficult judgment, and from a difficult opponent, whether he is a fellow Jew or not a fellow Jew. And Ken said that this was composed by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who was incidentally interacting with the same people, or almost the same people that Marcus Aurelius was interacting with. Okay. Sidebar, there is a whole question. There's this person called Antoninos in the Gemara who was a friend of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who was a Roman emperor who he interacted with. And for a long time, people thought that was Marcus Aurelius, and it stood to reason because Marcus Aurelius was into philosophy and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was into philosophy. and there's all these Gemaras about them interacting and having discussions, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, like, admitting that Marcus Aurelius is right in certain cases. I was gifted a book by one of my listeners, I think called the Prince and the Emperor, which is all about Yehuda Hanasi and the emperors he interacted with. And this by I forgot what the author's name is. I think it's Zakheim. And he did his research, and he is of the opinion that it couldn't have been Marcus Aurelius. Okay, I forgot who he says it was. So sadly, like it's fun to picture them together, but it doesn't seem to be historically true. But in point in fact, we do say this, or at least Ashkenazim say this. I want to point out, by the way, this is also a sidebar, but the Rambam in Sefer Ava, Hilchos Tefillah, Zion, he does not have that. The closest thing he has is in the bracha you say after you wash your face. Oh, hold on just a second here. Is he wrote something? Save me from evil inclination and from a bad occurrence. That's the closest thing he has to any of that. So it is interesting. Okay, so I will list this question. Okay, but I'm going to tack it onto Isaiah's, which is how does this, or doesn't it, square with our morning request from Hashem to save us from these categories of bad people? Okay, good. Ezra.
What's the relevance of the fact that the people harming him are of the same nature as him?
Yeah, okay. I am going to put this here. I was not putting these questions in order, but I'll order them later if need be. Okay, so what is the actually, this is kind of like Michael's question. Michael's question was, yeah. Wait, say your question again.
Why is it relevant that he's of the same nature as
Okay, right. Yeah. Why is this relevant? Okay, yeah. I'm just tagging out to Michael's. Yeah, Michael?
So I don't know if this is like, these might be minor questions, but a couple times he like gives long lists of like describing the type of people he's going to deal with, and he gives like a metaphor.
Yeah.
How much should we read into that, and like should we just ignore that?
Wait, metaphor, you're talking about the metaphor at the end?
Yeah, the teeth.
Okay, yeah. So and the list is talking at the beginning here.
Yeah.
So yeah, right. So I'm just to me those are like two separate questions. So I feel like I'm not understanding what you're asking. What's the question you're asking?
Like in Tehillim or Mishlei, if we had like a long list of adjectives or a metaphor, we would wonder, okay, what are each of these descriptions adding? What's the metaphor adding? Should we wonder that?
Oh yeah, okay. Those two separate questions, right? So
yeah.
So what I guess what I guess what do we get from this list of people at the beginning? Okay, like are these just examples, or is there a are I guess are these categories? Okay, right. I suspect that they're just examples, but and then what is the metaphor? That's a separate question, right? What is the metaphor of the body parts at the end? Yeah. Okay, Esty.
In what way he says that the people who are doing the wrong are akin to have like the same nature as him? In what way do they have the same nature as him?
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to tack this onto Michael's as well. So what exactly is he learning from the fact that the other person shares a portion in the divine? And how does this fit into his overall argument? Okay, so in what sense is he like these people by nature? And in what sense is he different from them? Okay, because he just listed a bunch of differences, right? So clearly he is different from them. And guess what? They're not writing these journals, right? Presumably. Yeah, Tamar?
What is that? What's his point about cooperation?
Yeah. What is his point about cooperation? I think that's part of the cooperation about the analogy. Yeah, Rachel?
Maybe this is the same thing, but just what he meant by like work together. Does he mean like coexist?
Yeah.
Or
okay, right. So let's actually make that into a separate question. What type of working together is he envisioning here, especially given the list of bad qualities. Yeah, this is related to Shmuel's question of, yeah, actually what I'm going to put this up by Shmuel's question, which is like, what are you supposed to do about the fact that these people have these qualities which make them seem like they're not good to work with, or you're not going to succeed in working with them? Yeah, Noah?
Mine is also about this general thing, but specifically thinking about the teeth, like teeth work by working against each other, like Ezer Kenegdo kind of thing. So I'm wondering, like, if he is not accounting for any sort of nuance, because these are different types of, relationships between the different metaphors.
Yeah, okay, I'll add that to this question here. And how specific is this metaphor? Okay, for example, hands work with each other, but teeth need to work against each other. Yeah, Michael?
When he says that he recognizes like the beauty of the good and I don't know, the ugliness of the evil, whatever he said, like what exactly, like he doesn't say what that causes him to do.
Okay, right. Okay, so that is a question that I'm going to put here. What, likewise, what does he mean by, that the good is beautiful and that the bad is ugly? Oh, I'm going to pause this. Okay, well, I'll write this first. Okay. And then how does this fit into his argument? And I'm also going to say, how does this fit into his argument? Okay, I apologize if anyone is taking notes. I am going to do what I do in Mishlei, which is to try to get these in some semblance of order, because we are going to go through this in order. Give me 1 second. I'm going to put tomorrow's question at the top, because that's really an overarching question. I'm going to make this into 2 questions. Okay, why should you tell yourself this in the morning? What is the list of the people? Okay. Where does he say the thing about ignorance? That's after the nature of the good, and then no, ignorance is first, right? So what does he mean that these things stem from ignorance? What is the nature of the good, and blah blah blah. What exactly is he learning from the fact that the other person shares an portion of the divinity? What does he mean that people can't harm him? What is the metaphor of the body parts and working together? Okay. I also wanted to say, now I lost my train of thought. What was the last question that was just asked? Was that about
the good and evil?
The good and the evil. Oh yeah, right. So here's a good example. As just going back to your question, kind of. So you see here, we have, I who have seen the nature of the good that it is beautiful, and the bad that it is ugly. Okay, so that's beautiful and ugly. Farquharson says, the nature of the good is the right, and of ill the wrong. And then Waterfield, I know that what is good is what is morally right, and what is bad is morally wrong. So like that's an example of like, those seem very different. Certainly the first one and the second two. And it's like, I can't help but like, I associate to categories that we have. And like, I think, it's like the Hebrew word, na'eh and meguna. Na'eh is literally means beautiful, but it really means something that you like look upon as being worthy or noble. And meguna is like despicable, but it's not just like the garbage in the garbage can is meguna. It's like, morally reprehensible. So like, you also kind of have to let your mind have these free flowing, like, associations as well. And like, I'm going to go ahead and in my mind, when I think about it, I'm thinking of na and maguna, so is that a good move or not? I don't know, but I don't have the Greek. So yeah. Okay. I feel like we have covered the main points. And so, yeah, Michael.
This is more of a methodology question, specifically about Marcus Aurelius. Since it was his journal, do you assume that each piece has its own like chiddush and insight, or do you assume that this could just be like he needed to hear this at this point?
Good question. Okay, so this is similar. Okay, so what Michael, just to expand upon your question here. So when we learn, let's say, halachic texts, okay, let's say like the Gemara or the Rambam, then we have this latent assumption that they're only going to write something if it's teaching you something new. Okay. And so we always are asking, what's the chiddush, or my kamash malan? What does this teach us? Chiddush meaning like a new insight. But then there is something like Mishle, okay? And Mishle is a book that is written to teach you ideas, but it's also written for the emotions, or same thing in Tehillim. It's written not just to teach you ideas, but to impact your emotions. And in the world of the emotions, it might not be a new intellectual insight. It might be that it's a new nuance of the idea, or bringing out a new application of the idea, or something that impacts you differently. So that's another category of chiddush, of a psychological or emotional or practical chiddush. That's not a new idea in terms of how we operate, but something that is just like something that can be, impact you differently. Okay. So Michael's question is here, since he wrote this for himself, if he's a teacher writing for his students, then maybe you'll assume that he's teaching them new ideas. But here, maybe he just needs to remember this. And in fact, he starts off by saying that he needs to remember this every morning, right? So what do we assume? So I think, because I don't know the answer to that, I think both of them are possibilities. Then I just keep an open mind and say, well, maybe this is a new idea, and maybe this is just a new emotionally resonant point. But I don't force a chiddush in the way that I would in the Rambam. I wouldn't say like there is no reason for him to have written this. Like we should know this already, because I just don't think that's fruitful for our learning. So that's like the approach I've been taking. Okay. Any other questions? We can always add more questions later. I'm just going to start importing these into the chat. Yeah, Esty.
Okay, I think this is a bad question. You'll
Okay.
understand why in a second. It's just like niggling at me. I just feel like when he said like he knows what the good is, like, is this just something we just, I mean, you were saying before, we're not going into that, his metaphysics. You just have to just take that and go with it, that however it is that he believes that he knows what the good is, as opposed to other people. I mean,
Yeah.
assuming everybody thinks that what they're
So
doing is good.
the way I would say it is, did Marcus Aurelius know what the good is or not? We can never know. And I think that's what you meant by like, it's a bad question, right? But
Yeah.
the way that we would approach it, I think, is that it makes sense to approach it is, if a person did know the good, then would this be true? Or how would this play out?
Okay, so you're saying in a certain sense, it almost doesn't even matter, because as long
Almost
as what
doesn't
he
matter.
says makes sense to us, and we can apply this, believing as we do that we do know things that are good,
Right.
that this is useful, and whatever it is that he was thinking is just kind of irrelevant.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to say it's totally irrelevant, because let's say the person who wrote this was a brainwashed person in North Korea, and he thinks that the good is whatever Kim Jong-un says. I don't think you could just like plug that in and assume that it's going to work out. So yeah, the general assumption that I'm working with here is, I wrote an article about this in 2 summers ago, maybe. Yeah. Okay. So in the book Radical Hope: Ethics in the Face of Cultural Devastation by Jonathan Lear, so he mentions this thing called the principle of humanity, which I never heard of before. And his version of it is, he says that we should try to interpret others as saying something true, guided by our own sense of what is true and of what they could reasonably believe. Okay. That's one version of this principle. Okay. Then here's Wikipedia's definition. When interpreting another speaker, we must assume that his or her beliefs and desires are connected to each other and to reality in some way, and attribute to him or her the, quote, the propositional attitudes one supposes one would have oneself in those circumstances. Slightly more cumbersome. Third formulation, in the same article called The Principle of Charity, says, to avoid attributing irrationality, logical fallacies, or falsehoods to other statements when a coherent, rational interpretation of the statement is available. And then the closest thing we have is emunas chachamim, okay, which is a phrase from the Brisa in Avos 6:6. And I quoted Rav Yitzchak Kanpanton, who's the author of Darchei HaTalmud, which is the first book by Rishon on Talmudic methodology. And here's what he says in Darchei HaTalmud 1:3. He says, at the outset of your analysis, and again, he's talking about Talmud, okay, he says, at the outset of your analysis, you should establish as a premise of your thinking that each of the speakers, the one who asks and the one who answers, that both of them are intelligent, and that all their words were spoken with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, without anything twisted or distorted. This is what the sages mean when they ask rhetorically, when they rhetorically exclaim, are we dealing with idiots? Atu b'shaftani askinan? Therefore, you must analyze all their statements and see if they are statements with sound reasons, as strong as a molten mirror, or whether they are weak statements, like bland food without salt. These are both quotes from Eov. And whether they're intellectually probable or improbable. One must strive to make their words probable and to adjust their ideational content so that the statements will be beautiful and acceptable and intellectually feasible. One must also strive not to ascribe to them the guilty iniquity of a tenuous or weak svara theory. None of their words should fall to the earth, and they are all the words of the living God. And if they are empty, the emptiness is from you. Now that's going. And now in this article, I wrote about what the difference is between Emunas Chachamim and these other three sources. And obviously, we don't assume that the words of Marcus Aurelius are Divrei Elokim Chaim. But I think that initial principle that we should try to interpret others as saying something true, guided by our own sense of what is true and of what they could reasonably believe. I think that's like the way I approach Stoics. That assume that what they're saying is intelligent. Ask yourself, what true idea could they be saying? But you have to be grounded in if you're positing all these twisted readings of what they're saying and it's not plausible, or you're reading your own ideas into them, then that's not intellectually honest. And you also, you are seeking truth, but you're also guided by what you hold to be true. So that's like describing what I try to do when I read the Stoics and really any philosopher. But I think this is like a good one sentence summary of like how I read it.
Right. And the part of me that wants to know, well, how do you know what's true? Like he says he knows, but he's not telling us how he knows. He's just going forward from that point.
Yeah, I'm going forward with that and saying, look, I am someone, I can't say I have, full knowledge of what the good is, but I do spend, many hours a day learning and teaching Judaism that is predicated on a certain idea of what the good is. And so, and from things that I've seen, there is a tight or large, I don't know what you say, what do you call a Venn diagram when there's like a lot of overlap, whatever you call it. There's like a lot of overlap in what I've seen him say about the good and what we say about the good. Okay, it's not full overlap. And I think there are huge gaps in Stoicism in terms of what one of my big critiques of Stoicism has to do with the view of the good. Okay, but there's enough of an overlap that I feel comfortable saying, well, let's posit that his idea of the good is very similar to ours. Would this statement be true, and would we get an idea from here? That's like how I'm approaching this. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, I know in Mishlei we have our thinking minute, but I think actually it would help us in our analysis if we color code this. Okay, to divide this into points. Okay, how many points are being made here? Okay. So we have at the start of your day, tell yourself, okay, that's where we're going to start our analysis. That's the, I guess, the type, the medium of or not the medium. That's what he's doing with this idea, right? There are ideas that but you don't recite every morning. So he's saying, no, this idea recite every morning. Okay. So we have to think about that. Okay. Then we have, I think this is again, go ahead and challenge me if you think that we should divide this differently. I should meet with people who are officious, grateful, ungrateful, abusive, etc. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I shouldn't do this here. I should do this here. Okay, so we have this. We have this point about these bad people and that this happens to them because they're ignorant of the good and the bad. And then we have, I think, let's treat this whole thing as one major point. Okay, that. I've seen the nature of the good and the right and the wrong, whatever, and that we have the same nature, and that actually, yeah, sorry. Let's make this into a new point also. I'm gonna just repeat the colors. Okay, I can't be harmed by any of them, and then this last point. Okay, so I'm gonna say that there are 5 points. Okay, and we can we can make subdivisions as needed. Okay, yeah, Tamar.
Maybe this is too minor of a question, but the top of the blue,
yeah,
that looks to me like it's part of the part before it.
So yeah,
I know it's part of the next sentence, but
no, I think so. In the argument, then these flow together. Okay, but in terms of the point that let's say for example this claim here that these bad qualities happen to them because of their ignorance of what is good and evil. That claim we have to discuss on its own, and if that falls apart, it seems like he can't make the point in blue. But the point in blue is a separate point. Like you could hold by green and not by blue, or vice versa. So that's why I'm treating it as a different point.
I guess I'm thinking that one of them is about good and evil, and one of them is about the similarity between people.
Okay, that's entirely possible. Let's put it this way. I want to analyze the point about these bad qualities happening because of ignorance of good and evil first. And then once we do that, then we'll examine the next point in light of that. And if it turns out that they're both just sides of the same coin, then that's it. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So let's start off with this. Okay. What do we get from the fact that begin the morning by saying this to yourself? Okay. Like, it's kind of a weird question that I'm asking here, but like, why should you tell yourself this in the morning? What is I'm going to add this here. Oops, sorry, hold on. What does this indicate about this kind of idea, or how Marcus is using it? Yeah, Tamar.
I mean, apparently it's not sufficient to just hear it once.
Okay, right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and you know what I'm going to do? Hold on just 1 second here. I don't know what the best way to take notes on this is, because we have so many questions. Let me put this down here. Okay, and we're going to relabel this question 3, and then we'll have answers or ideas. Okay, so sorry, the alignment is off. It's going to bug me all night. Okay, maybe I shouldn't be bugged by it because it's not harming me. Okay, so Tamar says that apparently it's not enough to just hear this once. Okay, and the question is why? Why not? Right? Yeah. SD, do you want to say your piece? I mean, you don't have to answer this question, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I would have said it more that this is something that needs reinforcement, that there must be some kind of natural inclination against it, or like some reason to forget it, that we have to keep reminding ourselves.
Okay, all right. So let's go like this. Okay, let's treat that as an answer. Okay, this needs reinforcement because there is some like counterforce within ourselves. I think that's a good assumption. That makes us prone to I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna borrow a term. I call this a Rabbi Sachs term, and not Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, our Rabbi Sachs, Rabbi Yoni Sachs. It's really from the Torah, but this is one of the biggest ideas in Rabbi Sachs's Torah, okay, which is zechira and shichacha, okay, is remembering and forgetting. Okay, so shichacha, which is forgetting. And the reason why this is I'm calling this jargon is this is not forgetting like I forgot which president Abraham Lincoln was, which number, you know. This is forgetting like, excuse me, like when you go to a shmorg at a wedding and there's lots of really good food and you like overeat, and then you're like, oh man, like last time I was in this position, I told myself I'm not going to do this again, and yet I did it again, you know. So like it's like a combination. You know the idea is true, but it's like it becomes less real to you. Okay, so this is an answer, and now the next question is, what is that counterforce? Okay, what makes us forget? Okay, Ezra, you can either answer that question, you can make your own answer to the original question.
Yeah, I would just add to it and say that not only is it something that we often forget, but it's something which is worthy of constantly reminding ourselves of, like possibly it's like a framework for how we view everything or something like that.
Okay, that's a good point, right? So this needs reinforcement. Okay, so I'm going to just put this as a separate thing. Additionally, this idea is worthy of remembering. Okay, so there might be ideas like which president Abraham Lincoln was that like you forget, but it's not so important to remember that. You know, or let's say even in Torah, like there are ideas that the Torah incorporates into memory mitzvos, right? Like the Shema that reminds you of God's oneness, or all the remembrances of the Exodus. And there are other things like, look, you know, Sukkos, right? So Sukkos is to remind us that God took us out of Egypt in Sukkos. The Yetzias Mitzrayim part, the Torah wants us to remember every day. There's no daily memory of Sukkos, right? Evidently, it's enough to have for once a year for 7 days, right? So it's worth remembering, but not as important as God's oneness. Okay, so the question is, what makes this idea worth remembering? Okay, Michael.
I think this could answer that question.
Yeah.
Is that I think the effect of saying that you should remember it you should tell it to yourself every morning, is it reminds you that like this is of necessity you're going to interact with these types of people, and this idea like will by necessity be relevant every day.
Okay, so is this idea is going to be this situation is going to come up every day, and you know, and this idea is going to come in handy every day. Okay, So that's an interesting category, right? It's not because the idea is the most important idea, but because you're going to need to use it a lot. And if you keep forgetting it, you're going to need to come up with a reminder every day. Okay. I have more to say on that, but I want to hear what everyone says first. Yeah, Shmuel?
So I'm sort of relating this to our modern day society where we have a lot of people. You look like where I work, I don't work in a very high class neighborhood. You know, my coworkers or I at points would look and say, "Oh, that guy struggles and we make certain assumptions about that person."
Yeah.
So I'm just I think that what it's saying is we're working together and
Wait. Are you
peace.
answering the question of why you need it every morning, or are you asking the question about working together?
Both.
Okay, so I'll hear you, but I don't want to lose sight of this question. So
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think it works better with the why we say it every morning.
Okay, go ahead.
Because so I think what it's trying to say is every day what you have to do is remember that the society works in cohesion, which is
Yeah.
and oftentimes we look through our own personal situations, and we have to remember that it's not just us, but it's everyone working together, which is why
Okay.
I said it works sort of for both questions.
Okay, good. All right, so here's the thing. Okay, so I think, oop, my phone turned on. Okay. All right, I won't rant about Gemini right now. All right, so I think that what you're answering is actually answering this question as well, specifically of what makes us forget. Okay, so let me just put down what you said, and then I just want to elaborate on this here. Okay, so we do as was this I don't know who's a Seinfeld fan, but I think it was George Costanza who said we live in a society. Okay, so we live in a society, okay, that requires people to look outside of themselves in order to help the society function. Okay, so I'm gonna stick with that for 1 second, okay, because I want to present this other idea. Okay, let's go back really quickly to what this counterforce. Okay, so again, today I was preparing this with Ken, and Ken had an interesting angle which I wouldn't have taken. Okay, which is let's be dan l'kafzchus. Let's judge people favorably. Okay, what is the, I guess, biological or evolutionary reason for why people are why people either forget this thing or why people have all these qualities? Maybe this is too obvious to like even talk about, but yeah, Tamar.
Sorry about that.
That's good.
I mean, why people have those qualities, I think they seem like a good idea in the moment. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly the reason.
So let me just reframe the question here. Okay, I'm assuming that when ST answered that this needs reinforcement because there's some counterforce within ourselves that makes us prone to shechara. So I'm assuming that this is a natural tendency. Okay, and what Ken is saying is he's saying, look at natural tendencies and assume that they serve a purpose that serve some function in nature. Like God did not design us with emotions that are or instincts that are completely baseless. So like what is the function of this emotion of like that produces these qualities here, and that might make us lose sight of this quality. Okay, yeah, Tamar.
I think it's like looking out for yourself.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm gonna just attribute this to Ken here, right? Okay, so like it is natural and biologically / evolutionarily advantageous to look out for yourself. I'm sorry, advantageous to look out for yourself. Okay, so advantageous. Okay, so the mistake though is that this is also very limiting. Okay, for you and for the whole society. Okay. So just keep that in mind for one thing. Yeah, Michael.
Sorry. I would think a separate answer for the why you might forget this is that you might think that it would be easier for you to like avoid these people or avoid their negative consequences if you perceive them as being like a real evil, and this way you'll be more focused on how to like overcome the obstacle.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. So right. So additionally, you might think that identifying them. Okay, so I'm realizing as we're going through this, let's abandon our plan of answering these questions one at a time. Okay, and let's just go wherever our analysis takes us, because I think these maybe I'm kind of tipping my hand here. I think there is a greater unity in these ideas than I think if we try to restrain the unity by answering these one at a time, then we'll clamp down on our analysis. Okay. And by the way, we're totally going to go over 9 p.m. Okay. So if you have to go, you have to go. Okay. But again, I've never given this year before, so we'll go until we have to. Okay. Shmuel, what do you want to say?
I was just thinking, right, that Marcus Aurelius, he wrote this down for himself, obviously, where he needed the reinforcement. And every morning when we wake up as Jews, depending on what you do when you wake up, we say Moda'ani,
Right.
which is like a reinforcement of gratitude. So Marcus Aurelius, he dealt with all sorts of different people, being in such a high position as he was, that he himself, despite knowing that he had strong enough character for this not to affect him, he needed the reinforcement every single day
Right.
for it to not affect him. So
Yeah.
it's not that he doesn't want to work with these people, because like he said, teeth work together,
Yeah.
but he also needs to be able to continue these people not affecting him.
Right.
So which is another thing of, why do we say this every day? Why does he say it every day? Why is it needed? Because everyone always needs reinforcement, even the great Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah. Okay, good. That is an important point. And that is, we are trying to get to the bottom of that, is why does everyone need reinforcement? That's like what we're trying to work on here. But I think it is important to realize, like you're saying, like even someone who is he's regarded as one of the great philosophers, but evidently he's not at the level where he doesn't need this. Like there is I'm going to go on a mini rant here. There's a common mistake you'll see out there on the internet and other places where people will have critiques of Stoicism, and there are things to critique, but they have misunderstandings of what Stoicism is. So one of the misunderstandings comes from the way that the English word Stoic is. Like this became this word that Stoic means is synonymous with emotionless. Okay, like Spock or whatever. And you see from Marcus Aurelius' writings that no, he was not an emotionless person, and he was not above feeling these things. He was annoyed by these people, so he had to constantly remind himself in advance that he's gonna encounter these people, every day, right? Because otherwise it would overwhelm him. But yeah, I think we're on our way to getting to the root of this, of what causes this. Okay, let's continue our analysis. But now again, feel free to answer whatever questions you want. But I don't want to restrain this. I think we should try to like just to get as much as we can here. Okay, because it's all related. Yeah, Noah.
Okay, so I feel like what I'm going to say is kind of hovering above or across or through
Okay, yeah, that's what's trying to be Matir here. Yeah.
But reminding yourself of something is obviously like a good way to not be ignorant. So I feel like there's a connection between those two pieces, and it's basically like telling your Yetzer Hara that like you are not gonna let him drive today, and you're gonna be a speed bump in the kind of like naturalistic spiraling snowballing process that turns into a cartoon brawl of everyone looking out for himself. And you have to conscientiously like tell yourself not to do that, because otherwise you can just get swept up in it.
Okay.
In the moment.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna listen. I just want to hear what Tamar's gonna say, and I want to elaborate on what you're saying and the point that I was bringing in from Ken, because I think they go together. Yeah, Tamar.
Can I take a stab at like a unifying idea?
Yes, please. Yeah, that's where I was gonna go also.
Okay. I feel like all of this is going around the idea of seeing other people in terms of like okay, I'm gonna use a vague term first, but like their essence and not their accident.
Correct.
So really we're all people, he's saying we're all people with like a divine spirit. And these things that I'm seeing, I'm looking at this person and seeing an arrogant person, but really this person is whatever he's defining a human being to be, and they happen to be ignorant, and that's causing them to be deceitful or arrogant.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So let me actually just introduce the way I was going to introduce the main idea. Okay, but we're going to go back to what Noah was saying and what Tamara was saying as well. From the Rambam. Okay, so this is, I mean, this idea is written in many places, but this is my favorite one. Okay, this is the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim 3:11. Okay, so let me back up for 1 second here. Okay, so the Rambam, I'm just going to drop a theory of evil here. Okay, the Rambam holds that all evils are or stem from privation. Privation meaning lack of a quality, of something that is good. Okay, of a quality, not equality. Lack of a certain quality or substance or good. Okay, and he's saying that to refute people who think that evil is an actual thing. Okay, the way the analogy I like to use, this is part of my EOV curriculum, is that good and evil are not like vanilla and chocolate, where they're like two different flavors. The good is ice cream, and the bad is lack of ice cream. Lack of ice cream is not a thing. There is only good, and then there's like the lack of that good. Okay, that's a whole elaborate topic, but I just want to state that because that's where the Rambam is coming from. Okay, so the Rambam, after establishing that evils are privations, okay, are lacks, says as follows: these great evils that come about between the human individuals who inflict them upon one another because of purposes, desires, opinions, and beliefs, all of them are likewise consequent upon privation, meaning lack of a good. For all of them derive from ignorance, I mean from a privation of knowledge. Now here's his great mashal. Just as a blind man, because of absence of sight, does not cease stumbling, being wounded, and also wounding others because he has nobody to guide him on his way, so too the various sects of men, every individual according to the extent of his ignorance, does to himself and to others great evils from which individuals of the species suffer. If there were knowledge whose relation to the human form is like that of the faculty of sight to the eye, they would refrain from doing any harm to themselves and to others. Okay, so this is the premise here. Okay, and I think this is the same premise that Marcus Aurelius has, which is that the only reason why one human being would do evil or harm or annoy another human being is because of some ignorance. Okay, and yeah, to really substantiate that claim, we would really have to go through a bunch of examples. But let's just start with this blind example, and I'm just going to give you a couple other examples, and then we'll go on. Okay, I'll call you in a second, Shmuel. With the blind person, the imagery, I've heard like mindfulness teachers talk about this a lot. Like the scenario, I don't know who came up with this, but whatever. You're in an elevator and you're standing like, you just got in and it's a packed elevator and you're like facing the door, okay, and like you feel someone like prodding at the back of your heels, and so you get annoyed and you don't say anything. Then you feel it again, and you react and hope that that's going to stop them, and then you feel it again, and then you finally like look back and like you're about to yell at the guy, and you realize it's a blind man, and he's got his cane and his walking stick, and he's trying to like feel where the door is. So what happens in that moment? So suddenly you switch. Okay, what was the assumption? The assumption was these people, this guy behind me is doing this to me. Okay, he intends to annoy me, right? But really, you find out like, no, he didn't know he was doing it to you, and he was really just trying to find out like where the door is, and if he knew that he was doing this to you, he wouldn't do it. Okay, so same thing with all other forms of evil and all other bad decisions. And this is the Rambam's premise. For any of you who have learned Mishlei, this is Mishlei's premise also, which is that all foolish decisions, ultimately, in terms of probability, are going to harm the person who made them. And all evil, when you're a Russia and you're trying to exert your will on others in order to dominate them for your own power and greatness, eventually that will collapse and will harm you. And if you really realize that, if you're a fool and you really realize how self-destructive your decision was, or if you're a Russia and you realize that this cannot last and it's going to collapse on you, you wouldn't do it. No one wants to do evil to themselves. And anytime you act against reality, it's going to eventually, culminate in self-harm. It might not be now, it might not even be in years, but it's going to ultimately be a self-destructive thing. That's Marcus Aurelius's premise here. Okay, Shmuel.
I don't want to oversimplify it, and I'll just start by saying that. But what it seems to me to be is that Marcus Aurelius is on his high horse saying, I know better than everyone else. And by acknowledging that everyone else is ignorant, he sort of gives them the benefit of the doubt each time that they sort of annoy him or make him angry or act in any sort of not good way.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know
okay,
if I
yeah.
got
So
that right.
I agree with half of your observation. Okay, is that I do agree that he's giving them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, and it's not the normal kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. Okay, because giving the benefit of the doubt means that you have a doubt. Okay, and you're saying that, oh, I'm gonna assume I have two options about what to assume. I'll assume the best. Marcus Aurelius is it's not like he's naively going around assuming that, like, if someone does something that has really bad intent, then really the person had some good intent or some not bad intent. It's not like a naive type of benefit of the doubt. He's saying that this guy wants to destroy me, okay? But and therefore, let's say, like, I think at one point in Marcus Aurelius' thing, then people were like spreading like slander about him, so he's not saying, like, I'm gonna give this guy the benefit of the doubt and assume that he, like, really isn't trying to, like, take me down. No, he's saying that this guy is engaging in slander, and he mistakenly thinks that slander is the way to bring about good for himself or for the kingdom. But I know that lashon hara is a self-destructive thing. It ruins your relationships. It promotes distortion and falsehood. It creates societal rifts, and you tends to like multiply problems rather than solving them. And this guy really is trying to do what he thinks is best for himself and maybe even for the kingdom. But, he thinks that slander is like an effective way to do this. And really it's not. And I do feel sorry for him. So I'm trying to say that the benefit of the doubt is, he's saying definitively anyone who does evil is ignorant. Now, and that's where I'm disagreeing with the part of your statement is, and maybe you were using the statement loosely, is being on his high horse. You're right in the sense that he is assuming that he knows better than the other guy. Okay. But at the same time, he is also making a statement about why all people make bad decisions in general. He's saying all people do evil because of ignorance, and he would include himself in that. He's saying, I also would only do evil if I had some lack of knowledge of the good, So I don't think he's holding himself on his high horse, like assuming that he's always right and the other guy's always wrong. And I also don't think he's being naively giving the person the benefit of the doubt. I think he's giving like an overall framework about how to view people who are engaged in these actions that are almost always bad. Being officious is almost always going to be unproductive and bad. Being ungrateful, being abusive, being treacherous, being malicious, being selfish. Person would never be selfish in a knowingly self-destructive way. Person would never be malicious if he knew that would harm him or harm other people, which in turn would harm him. So I think I think it is a genuine giving the benefit of the doubt, but it's categorical, and it's not stemming from an assumption that he's intrinsically superior. It's stemming from an assumption that I happen to have knowledge of this, whereas these guys don't.
Right, Rabbi.
Yeah.
So I like to I want to relate this to, I guess, either anti-Semites or racists,
Okay.
which are an extreme of like sorts of evil, but each of these groups, they have sort of an agenda.
Yeah.
And it's a purely evil agenda, and just giving them the benefit of the doubt, that's not fair because they are evil. But I think what Marcus Aurelius is saying here is that had they known that really there's nothing intrinsically bad about Jews or Black people or any other race, then they wouldn't have acted this way despite their agenda.
Yeah. But I think he's saying a little bit more also, is he's saying that like they think, maybe this is what you're saying, but they think that their agenda, they have a lot of mistakes in their agenda, but they think that their agenda actually is for the good. Like I want to read this excerpt from The Gift of Fire, which is this is the first time I encountered this idea. Okay. This is by Richard Mitchell. He says, and he articulates your case really well. He says, I just want to see where this starts. I'm just gonna start here. This is kind of in the middle of a point. Satire is a cunning, landless opportunist who poaches along the borders of the two great realms of tragedy and comedy. The hunting is good, no doubt, for the satirist is nourished by folly and vice, of which there is said to never be a shortage. But perhaps I was reared in comedy's fair land. I'm not convinced of that. Folly is thick on the ground, but where is vice? Okay, here's the point. Where is vice? Vice meaning bad qualities. I truly do know and can demonstrate just as surely as one can provide a proof in geometry that certain influential persons, especially in schools, do bad things to other people. Okay, background here, he was a teacher who was critical of like American education, and so he's talking about other teachers. Says so people in school, meaning teachers, do bad things to other people, but they are not villains. They do not will badness. On the contrary, probably far more than most of us, they deliberately intend to do good things, and I'm certain that they would do good things if only they could make sense. But all of that obviously could be said of any one of us. Now here's the point. Outside of the pages of fantastic fiction, there is no one who says in his heart, I will do evil. We all intend the good and would, at least often, do it if we could, but we don't always understand what the good is. Okay, so take like the Islamic extremists in these terrorist groups, you know, they do think that they are bringing about the will of God and that is good, right? It's just they have a very messed up idea of what constitutes that. What do you say to that, Shmuel?
I think that is true, but I think that reinforces the point of benefit of the doubt. He knows that they have good intentions, but he is also very much aware of their evil sort of roots where they get these intentions, which is where sort of the ignorance comes into play.
It's funny you say it that way, because I would say it the opposite way. I would say that they have bad intentions. Sorry, not in this sense. I mean, I see where you're coming from, but like they intend bad. This guy intends to be what do you call treacherous. Like he's committing he's trying to commit treachery, right? But it comes from a good root, which is like, you know, they want to do good, but they're just ignorant, you know. Maybe we're saying the same thing. I'm not sure.
I think you said the same thing, just a little bit different.
Okay, yeah, I was just flopping the good and the bad. Yeah, and I just want to highlight also, again, this does not translate into naivete in action either, meaning he went to war with people who were trying to destroy Rome. So, and he is saying this about them, like he's saying like these people who are trying to like sack Rome, and who succeeded like in the, I think it was after him, they think that like looting and pillaging or whatever is like is good, and that Rome is evil. And in his opinion, they are sadly misguided, but he's still going to go and he's going to try to stop them. But boiling down to what Tamara is saying, Tamara said that the main idea is recognizing the common essence that everyone has, and realizing what is the essence and what's not. And the essence is everyone has the same portion of the divinity, meaning has intelligence and mind, not the same amount of knowledge and not using knowledge in the same way, but everyone is at the core a Tselem Elohim, a truth-seeking intellect who is using their mind to try to do what is good for themselves. But a lot of people get it wrong, and that's why these people engage in antisocial behavior. Yeah, Benji, sorry, I kept you waiting for a while. What do you want to say?
I think you answered my question.
Oh, okay, good. But let me go back to Tamar's point here, okay? And ultimately to Noah's, which I've now forgotten what point Noah, just jog my memory. Do you remember what point you said was like a wide sweeping thing?
We remind ourselves of this so that we don't become ignorant.
Oh,
like
yeah,
other
okay,
people
right.
And spiral.
Right, okay.
And yeah.
So here's the theory that Ken and I came up with, okay? Is that what's the normal tendency that what would a normal person feel when someone relates to them with abuse or ingratitude or treachery, right? So you assume like Michael was saying, that this is a bad person, okay? But what else do you assume? You assume that they're doing this to me, okay? I think that's often a common assumption, okay? And what Marcus Aurelius is saying is he's saying, no, there's really two frameworks you could be in. You could be in the framework that this person is in, where they are locked in a very selfish framework, okay? And we like we were saying before, like biologically and evolutionarily, we're primed this way to like care about ourselves first, okay? But it's very limiting, and these people are limited by this, and they're assuming like that everything that happens in the world is a reaction to me, and they inflict that on other people, and Marcus Aurelius is basically saying, look, I can choose to either react to these people as though they are deliberately trying to harm me, or I could recognize, no, this is not all about me, and that these people are just acting out of ignorance. And I could realize that they are fundamentally the same as I am, and we are all in a society together that it's in our best interest to work with each other to try to attain the good for both of us, like the the body parts. But my point I'm trying to make is that this is the binary. In other words, the same reason that Marcus Aurelius needs to remind himself of this every morning is the same reason that these people are acting this way. Namely, that our default position is this position where we feel I'm the most important being. Everything that happens is in relation to me and should serve me, and I'm entitled to that. And if you don't do this to me, then like you're bad. That's what's causing these people to act this way, and that's what he has to constantly fight against by reminding himself every morning, like a bracha, in order to not lapse into that. Because when someone does annoy you, then it does feel like they're targeting you. I'm going to give two examples. I'm going to give a mushal, then I'll give an example. Okay. Actually, I'll call Benji first, so I don't forget about him this time. Yeah, Benji.
Yeah, it's true that sometimes like it's not about you, but what if their philosophy is, I want to do what's good for me and bad for
okay,
this
good.
person.
Okay, yeah. So I'll answer this with this first mushal. Okay, so apparently and Tamara, you don't have to tell me if you remember this, but I'm trying to see who else here. Yeah, so Tamara's the only one who was in my early Shalhavit classes. Apparently I used to say this a lot, which leads me to believe I got it from Rabbi Moskowitz, but maybe I came up with it. Okay, and I'm sure I've talked about this in Mishlei before. So this is the mushal of the cymbal monkey. The monkeys that clang the cymbals, that they're toys that you wind up and they just like walk forward and they clang the cymbals. So apparently what I used to say all the time is 99% of people are cymbal monkeys, and instead of the mechanics of the toy, it's the mechanics of their personality, their nature and their nurture. And they're just wound up and they just enact their personality indiscriminately, So if they'll do it, and some people, if the monkey is unimpeded, it'll go forward, and if it's impeded, it might just be against the wall, or it might get knocked over and still keep on doing what it's doing. But the point is that it's not really interacting based on the terrain. It's just operating based on its personality. Okay. So when someone, let's say in the customer service industry, okay, someone yells at a waiter, right? It's easy for the waiter to take personal offense at them. But if you take a step back and you realize that this person's operating on their personality, and their personality is such that like they have this sense of entitlement, or they think that yelling at someone is a way to get what they want, or they think that like that you can treat service people in a non-human way, and really this is going to start to answer Benji's question. They're not doing this to you, they're doing this at you. You just happen to be there, and it's not about you. They just think that this is how you operate in the world. And if someone swapped you out with another person, they would do that to them also. And the proof is that if you follow this person around with a camera, you'll find that they do this everywhere, or if they only do it once, it's because that situation only came up once. My point is that they're just playing out the mechanics of their personality. Same thing with evil, okay, is that there are, let's take just a case of evil that is not like an ideological evil, people who go around and like mug people and take their money or kill them, they don't really care who they're killing, it's just you happen to be the one who walked into the dark alley, so that's that as well. And that addresses acts of real like interpersonal evil, like murder. And in ideologies as well, like the Hitlers of the world are trying to gain power and absolute power and greatness. Now, if Hitler happened to not be in politics, but instead were a TSA guy, he would act out his Hitlerian personality in the small little kingdom of the TSA of his station or whatever, and he would try to get power and lord it over the people who he's going through airport security. Again, I'm making up this mushroom, but I'm saying that it is evil in the sense that it is objectively destructive and it's objectively distorted, but it's not personal. That's the point I'm trying to make. Even in these great cases of evil, it's not personal. You are just, they're relating to you as an object, not a subject, as a chetza, not as a gavra. Yeah, Ezra.
Why do you think people are more offended and care more if it is personal? Like, why should
I think because of what I was saying before, which is that we are all very self-centered and we all have a big ego and we all are default wired to assume that anything that happens in the world has to do with me. And I think that's just our default setting. And you can ask why people are egotistical, and I'm trying to answer that as much as I can by saying that it is advantageous, it is advantageous as an organism to care about yourself and to care about your pain and your pleasure. And when there's a threat to you and when there's someone who's beneficial to you, it's hardwired into who we are as animals. If you look at what's his name, Tim Urban has a great article called Tim Urban Mammoth. Why people should stop caring about what others think in the way, but why. And he basically talks about how we're hardwired with this evolutionary thing to evolutionary programming to like care about what others think, and how that serves a good purpose as a species, but not in an individual way. Yeah. Does that answer your question or not really?
I'm not sure. I mean, like, why? Let's say somebody's harming me, and
Yeah.
I think that they're doing it because they don't like me and they're trying to harm me. But in reality, or in the other situation, is they're just doing it because their own thing, but it harms me the same. So why would it bother me more? Like, it does, but why does it bother me more?
Okay, good question. Yeah, Esty, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I
Okay.
had a thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that like Ezra, you're saying, right, the harm is the same, right? So what's the difference whether it's meant to harm me or not? I think that we just, just to invert a little bit what Rabbi Shneor was saying, we do all have just psychologically, and we could talk about another time why it is psychologically that we feel that we're the most important thing, in the world, in the universe. So even though rationally we're able to, conduct ourselves all the time with the awareness that it's not really true, something that it's like pokes the bear, that's something we're always fighting against and we're always trying to put down. And if that, arouses that sense of like, I'm the most important thing in the world and you're attacking, then realizing that that's not what's happening allows that like primitive part of the self to detach. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
That's well said. That's well said. I want to, okay, let's talk about the plan for tonight. Okay, it's almost an hour and a half into this. So I do think we'll stop at 9:30 Eastern time in 7 minutes. And I think we're not going to get through all the ideas. There's a lot more here. But we'll come back to this next time. But I just want to try to get out a few more points. One is an example. Yeah, see.
I just wanted to make like a universal statement about it and the way that I was saying it.
Yeah.
It did seem to me the way that the whole idea was structured was that, like, if I would say like, that within himself, he has recognized that each day he feels a personal affront when people do things. And what he's doing is he is priming himself to remember the fact that this is not personal so that he can do what he thinks is the good, which is to work harmoniously with these people.
That's a great unified idea. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, one piece though, which none of us have addressed, is the I cannot be harmed by any of them. And this is a critical piece of Stoicism and also in Judaism. Okay. And I've quoted many times in our Tehillim Shiur. Okay. Marcus Aurelius 4:8, book 4, chapter 8, he says, "What does not make a man worse than he was, neither makes his life worse than it was, nor hurts him without or within." Okay. I go back and forth about whether Judaism would have the exact same view. Okay. But let's just talk about what he means by this at first. Okay. Which is that Marcus Aurelius' premise here is that the only thing that matters in life, the only true good and true evil, is your virtue and your vice, is your morality, okay, your decision making. So another person can harm your body or harm your possessions. Okay, like they could injure you, they could burn down your house, but they can't touch your free will. Okay, and the only way that these people could actually harm you is if they made you into a worse person. And I forgot who said it earlier. I think Isaiah said, can't these people influence you by their qualities? The answer is no. If this person is abusing you and like you take revenge on them, they didn't make you do that. You made yourself do that. So these people can be a stimulus or provide an opportunity for you to become a worse person. But the only person who can actually make yourself worse is you, based on how you react to them. And so no one can really harm you based on their own bad qualities. They can only harm your possessions and your body, and maybe even hurt your feelings, but your feelings aren't you. And just speaking from experience, from my attempts to like apply this, when you realize this, to the extent that you realize this principle, you gain a certain invulnerability. There is a certain sense of invincibility, because you realize, like, the instinctive feeling is this person's harming me because they're hurting my feelings, or they're threatening something, or they might take away some like material good that I have. And yeah, that is a reality, but it's not an essential harm. The essential harm is harming your person. And I'll give a weird analogy. I just came back to Seattle and I rented out my car, and the person I rented my car to called me or sent me a voice message and said that he noticed that the front is dented and that the hubcap is missing. And I explained to him, I said, we used to teach in a parking lot where there were a lot of senior citizens, and someone at some point must have just pulled out and like dented my car. And then the hubcap popped off last summer, and then I got it replaced and it popped off again. So I asked the car guy, I said, does this affect do any of these things affect the function of the car? Do I have to worry about my wheel falling? He said, no, it's all cosmetic. All cosmetic, fine. Doesn't matter to me, right? Because to me, the appearance of the car is not essential to the function. So did this harm my car? No, it didn't harm my car. The hubcap came off, and the front is dented, but like, it's not my car. My car is the thing that allows me to go from point A to point B. So it didn't really harm my car. And so similarly with yourself, if these people are being annoying to you and you feel like it's harm, it's not actually harm. It is, the only way they can harm you is if they make you a worse person. And the only person who can make you a worse person is yourself. And so it all comes down to how you're going to react to this person. If you remember this idea and you realize this is just a symbol monkey, they're not doing this to me, they're doing this at me, it's only happening because they have an ignorance of what is good. And it's not, it's really not their fault. Like, why does this person have an ignorance of the good? I mean, it might be their fault, but here's what I'm giving benefit of the doubt in the normal way. Most people are just a product of their nature and their nurture. And most people had huge gaps in their nature and their nurture. So maybe it's their parents' fault, or and their parents, in most cases, it's not, it would take a real special Russia to make a real decision to harm someone by evil. And even that comes from ignorance, but maybe there they can take ownership over not like investigating. Like maybe if you have someone who made themselves worse, with real decisions, like then that's a different story. But most people who you're interacting with are not going to be like this. And I want to just give an example of this. Last night on the plane, as soon as we got onto the plane, there was a girl who looked to be like maybe 6 or 7, who was across from me, who was crying and wailing, saying, "I don't want to be on the plane," and there was a elderly woman in the row in front of her who just kept on shaking her head, and like glancing back at the mom, and then this elderly woman also was doing things like during the flight, then I guess they were crushing ice to make more ice for stuff, and it was making this like noise, and this woman kept on like glaring back as though like this is as though this is being done to her. And I wasn't thinking of this, but I was thinking like, look, this girl does not understand how planes work, right? Like, this little girl is 7 years old. She doesn't understand that yelling and screaming is not going to get her off of the plane. She was also screaming that she just wants to get to Seattle. She doesn't understand that you can't get from New York to Seattle without flying there, and she wasn't understanding that everyone around her has this animosity towards her. But this woman was also not understanding that that getting upset at a 7-year-old girl who can't understand this, or who's cranky for other reasons, or glaring at the ice person is not going to make it go away. And this girl's not doing it to you, and this person's not doing it to you. And if this ice crushing person knew that it was annoying, I talked, I heard the stewardesses, and the stewardesses, I can only assume that they were very, from their interactions with customers, were genuinely trying to like be helpful to the customers. You could only assume that if they knew that they were annoying her, then they would either apologize to her or they wouldn't do it. So this woman and this girl are essentially both babies. Like they're both having this additional suffering because they don't understand how reality works, and it's coming from ignorance. And if I allow myself to get annoyed, I was learning at the time. I was writing. I was having a discussion with my students, and if I allowed them to annoy me to the point where like I'm consumed in this selfish, egocentric point of view, where like I'm letting them impair my learning, and feeling like they're bad and they're doing it to me. So I am being harmed by them, but I'm harming myself. So I'm not really being harmed by them. So it's just like, this is a very universal idea to keep in mind in all these cases. And like Ezra said, experientially, once I practiced this a long time, but like the more you practice this, the less you feel like you're suffering, because you feel sorry for these people, that they're so not in control of their own way of thinking about reality, that like I wish they had access to the knowledge that I had access to, and they just wouldn't suffer as much. Yeah, Ezra?
Yeah, a question on this idea.
Yeah.
So in this example, let's say, so with the old lady who was getting upset at that little girl, it's true that the little girl didn't directly harm her at all.
Right.
But in reality, if the little girl wasn't there or wasn't screaming something like that, she would be much happier than now. Right. And it's true, it's because of her own imperfections. But ultimately, wasn't there still harm that came to her indirectly because of her? Like if the situation didn't come about, she would be in a better state.
Okay, so I'm going to answer this really quickly. We're over time already, but I'm going to quote this thing I always quote from Epictetus. If you have to go, you have to go, by the way, again. I hope I said that before. Bathing? Yeah, okay, so I love this. Okay, so he says, this is in the handbook, chapter 4, okay? He says, I'm sorry, I just messed up my alignment here. He says, when you are about to undertake some task, remind yourself what sort of business it is. If you are going out to bathe, bring to mind what happens at the baths. There will be those who splash you, those who will jostle you, some will be abusive to you, and others will steal from you. And thus you will undertake the affair more securely if you say to yourself from the start, I wish to take a bath, but also to keep my moral character in accordance with nature. Do likewise with every undertaking. For thus, if anything should happen that interferes with your bathing, be ready to say, oh, well, it was not only this that I wanted, but also to keep my moral character in accordance with nature. And I cannot do that if I'm irritated by things that happen. Okay, so let's apply this to the kid, right? So there are certain things that are very hard to predict. But guess what's a stereotype? The crying kid on the airplane, right? Like that is a stereotype. Like what if you're ever by the crying kid on the airplane, what do you say to yourself? You don't say like, oh my gosh, there's a crying kid. You say, oh, I got seated next to the crying kid. Like you already assume the crying kid, that there is going to be a crying kid, right? But what is it is you assume the probability is such that it's not going to happen to you. Why would you assume that? Only because you're selfish and you assume that everything should revolve around you, So what would it look like for this old woman to have, this mentality, that Epictetus was describing, is she should walk into the plane and say, like, look, there is a chance that I will be seated by an annoying stimulus. This is something that happens on airplanes. And if and just as it is irrational to assume that it will never rain in Seattle, okay, or to assume that it will never be hot in New York, this is part of the environment. And I can just want there to never be rain in Seattle and sun in New York, but I'm going to be as disappointed as that girl on the plane. I can also want there to not be annoying stimuli on the plane. What I'm trying to argue is that this is really a matter of her giving herself a reality check and then realizing, like, okay, this time I drew up this lot of getting next to this girl or this ice, and like I want to keep I can either choose to be annoyed and then skew my moral character like this, or I can realize, like, no, I this is something that I want to it is irritating. I prefer for this not to be the case, but I don't have to rage at this girl who can't control her own emotions. I think it is her choice. This woman's choice. Okay, we've gone far over time, and I think from now on I'm going to schedule this year for 90 minutes. Let's just summarize the main idea that we have, but I do want to come back to it next time because there's still more to get out of it, and then we'll move on. Esty, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you mind just stating the way that you said the main idea that as you saw it again, because I thought it was really well said.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, that what he's saying is that every morning he's preparing himself, like he's fortifying himself because he expects that he's going to be irritated by these people, and he's preparing for the day by recognizing that's going to happen and reminding himself that they are like him, but they don't know the good. And in order to be able to accomplish what he really wants, which is to be able to work harmoniously with them, he's recognizing his own tendency to get irritated and recognizing it's based on a falsehood so that he doesn't do it.
Okay, excellent summary. And the only thing to add that I'll add here is that last idea, which is that if he allows himself to get mad at these people, in a way that takes it personally or assumes that they are evil, then he is harming himself, because these people can't harm him. The only harm is making you into a worse person, and the only one who could do that is yourself. Okay. I hope this was a worthwhile endeavor. I'm looking forward to continuing this, and as you can see, it's very rich. And he was a chacham. And can you just imagine, Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful person in the world. Okay, the greatest leader. Can you imagine if our politicians and leaders thought like this? Like, even if they tried to be like this, like what the world would be
like 1/10 like this.
1/10 like this, yeah, exactly. So it's an amazing thing. And again, he had access to all of the wealth in Rome. I mean, like he had people fawning over him. Like, it is incredible that he was able to maintain this in the face of all of that, and to be who he was. So good role model. Yeah. Okay, so to be continued, Bli Neder next Wednesday, and we will continue on from where we are. And if you know someone who would enjoy this, then feel free to send them the info. Okay, have a good night, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Bye.